Yo, what is up, boys? It is your boy Zeddy here, and I am back at it again to bring you guys a brand new series. This obviously being What If Deku was Spider-Man. But before I get started into the video, I just have one quick thing to say. This video is being sponsored! Now, it's not actually being sponsored, but it is a commission What If, and it is commissioned by the man, the myth, the legend, pothead artist himself. He's actually the one who drew the costume design for this version of Spider-Man, not the one in the thumbnail, but the costume design, which I will be showing in part 2 if you decide to stick around for the ride. That being said, though, you guys need to get ready for this What If. So I'm just going to give you guys time to go get your snacks, your popcorn, tell your friends to hop on the Zedder channel, and, get ready for this amazing What If. Okay, so we start the story off with the teacher asking Deku if he knows what type of spider this is. The teacher would be referring to a spider that's actually within a glass box inside of a school field trip. This is when Deku would look at her as he would say, "Oh, of course," and he would then answer the question, to which she would say, "That's the perfect answer." As Bakugou would then yell out from the back, he would say, "Of course that nerd Parker can answer it. He's a total loser." As their entire class would proceed to look at Deku and just start laughing, the teacher would look at Deku and she would give him like a little bit of a sad smile, and she would say, "Guys, that's enough. Leave Izuku alone," as Bakugou would start laughing and everybody would go off. At this point, Deku would kind of be used to everything. This is kind of the daily routine in his life, and Deku honestly just doesn't feel the need to say anything about it. I mean, what's the point anyways? At this point, Deku would be in 6th grade, and they would actually be on their last field trip. It would be the second to last week of school for him, and at this point, Deku would be 11 years old. Of course, most average 6th graders are about 11 to 12 years old. So yeah, Deku would be 11, and this is when Deku would kind of just be like, well, another day, I guess, as Deku would continue to follow his class. On this particular day, they're on a field trip to Osborne Tech. And now some of you guys may be like, "Yo, dude, Osborne isn't he in America and in New York?" To which I'm going to be answering that by saying plot. All right. Just simply plot. Okay, let's just say that this version of events, Osborne, his parents ended up tragically passing away, and so Osborne was moved to Japan where he has another family, right? And he started building his multi-billionaire company, which is Osborne Tech. On this particular day, the school would have actually decided that it would be a nice little change of pace, that instead of going to some amusement park or, something cool like that, they should just go and learn something, have a cool learning experience with one of the richest men in the world, Osborne himself. They would all be on the field trip, and this is when Deku would be walking, kind of just following in the back, tailing behind everybody, and Bakugou would be the center of attention, as they would all be led by just a little bit of a worker at Osborne Tech. She would be guiding them through the area, and this is when they would get to about the 4th level. This is when Deku would notice that he would actually notice Osborne himself. As Deku would see Osborne walking away, Deku would want to ask him a question, so he would start to tail behind him and completely lose track of his class. This is when Deku would proceed to basically start kind of tailing Osborne, and he would start to follow him, as I already stated. As Osborne would basically just be walking through the corridors, he would kind of not really notice Deku, seeing as they're walking on a little bit of a carpet type floor, and he is walking pretty fast. Deku would be walking after him trying to say something, but Deku would end up losing him after he turns the corner. At this point, Deku would look around and he would see 2 doors, to which Deku would be like, where did he go? As Deku would then say, "I really wanted to ask him something." As Deku would say, "Well, I guess it can't be helped." Deku would be like, "No, I need to ask. I need to know." Also, guys, apologies for that background noise, but Deku would say, "I need to know," as he would then basically open the wrong door. Osborne would have been to the left, but Deku would have opened the right door. And this is when Deku would immediately walk into a room which has a sort of hologram projectile of a spider web. At this point, Deku would stumble back after seeing that. He would see a giant projectile of a spider, and Deku would say, "What?" As he would stumble back and he would knock down a little container of glass. Deku would look around, he would see, "Oh no. This is not okay." But before Deku can even pay more attention to that, this This is when Deku would notice the spider would begin to change, and he would see many spiders crawling around. It would be a scene very reminiscent to the Amazing Spider-Man, the original, the movie which, you know, Andrew Garfield was in. And Deku would just kind of be like, this is incredible. This version of Deku would be way more intelligent than his original counterpart, due to the fact that, you know, this man is Izuku Parker, not Midoriya, and his father's name is Parker. Right? Inko will, of course, stay the same, and Deku will have inherited his father's hair color. That's why his hair is like that, and his hairstyle as well, which is why Deku looks like that. Now, this is when Deku would kind of realize that he probably shouldn't be in here, and Deku at this point would start to walk out. However, he wouldn't have noticed that the spider, it would have definitely crawled onto his leg in a Spider-Man fashion. Now, inside of the room, there was a sort of presentation which I forgot to mention. They were designing a genetically enhanced spider, which was actually going to be far stronger than Peter's version in the original comics, and even more powerful than Miles' spider. Due to the fact that in this world, quirks are inherently common. Everybody and their mother has a quirk, so what would it do good if somebody just had some normal spider powers? It's not really a big thing anymore. In this world, that's not considered that impressive. So, Osborn Tech took it a step farther, and they were working on a secret project which was actually meant to go towards military forces of Japan to increase their soldiers' strength. Seeing as most soldiers nowadays have incredible quirks, but what if on top of that, they had genetically enhanced soldiers? And that's what Osborn Tech was working on. On top of that, they were also working on a toxic gas, which is the ingredients for the Green Goblin, seeing as he's definitely going to be a big part to the story. There's not going to be any other characters involved in the series other than he and two more characters. Okay, two more characters will be introduced later on. Now, this is when Deku would walk out of the place, and Deku would honestly just walk over to his class, as he would find them, and he would just kind of just tail behind his group, as nobody would have really noticed that Deku was gone. Nobody was looking at Deku after all. Not even the teacher would have. She would have been more focused on controlling Bakugou and his weird, naive nature. This is when Deku would go home, and of course, by the time that he was on his way home, he would have felt a little bit of a poke on the back of his neck. Deku would, of course, write this off as a mosquito bite, and Deku would go home. As Deku would wake up the very next day, and in just a very common Spider-Man fashion, when he would go over to his mirror to kind of just wake up and splash some water in his face to clean himself off for the day, for the very next for the weekend, for the weekend. Do I want to make it like this? Yeah, let's just say that the powers take a little longer to kick in, right? Deku spent the entire weekend kind of not really doing anything, and of course, Deku would wake up on Monday, just due to the fact that I want to make the story go by a little different. Or we could just say that their field trip was, we're just going to say that their field trip was on Sunday, the day that, school wasn't around. So the very next day, Deku would wake up, and of course, he would go over to brush his teeth and get ready for school. As Deku does this, he wouldn't have a shirt on, and Deku would notice that his body looks so toned. He has abs, and his arms, they're so much bigger than usual. Deku would start to check himself out a little bit and be like, whoa, as Deku would kind of just start admiring what he looks like. As this is when Inko would walk into the room, and she'd be like, hey, Izuku, I need you outside. Breakfast is ready? She would see Izuku looks totally ripped, and she would say, whoa, you've been working out? Deku would see that he has, and Inko would smile as she would say, all right, well, come get your breakfast in 5, all right? It's getting cold, as Deku would say, right, and he would end up just kind of brushing his teeth pretty quickly, throwing his shirt on and grabbing his backpack, as he would say, thanks for the grub, Mom, as he would end up running outside of the door, and she would say, that kid, as, Hisashi Parker's just sitting there on the table with this newspaper, just being like, that kid, as he'll basically just have Deku going onto the bus and having a normal school day up until they get to lunch. Now, this is when Deku would kind of just be sitting in there, and everything would be completely normal until Deku would kind of be going over to grab his silverware. As Deku would do that, he would make a sort of weird like Spider-Man motion with his hand. As he was going to go do that, he would end up accidentally shooting a spider web in front of him, and what do you know it? That was Bakugou's table. And guess who he hit? Yeah, It was Bakugou. He hit Bakugou with spiderweb, even stickier than Spider-Man's himself. As Deku would immediately realize what he had just done, Deku would try to shake the spiderweb off of him, and Bakugou would turn around as he would say, "Who did that?" Deku would immediately put his hand behind himself and act as if he doesn't know what's going on, with Bakugou walking up to Deku, seeing that the spiderweb was connected to Deku's hand. He would pick him up by his shirt and say, "You want to start something, nerd? Because I can finish it." As Deku would say, "I'm sorry, Kachan. It was an accident. I swear." As Bakugou would say, "No, there's no accidents." This is when a teacher would walk up to Bakugou and say, "Hey, settle down." As Deku would be sitting there kind of with fear in his eyes, say, "Yeah, Bakugou, I swear I didn't do it." Bakugou would let Deku go and say, "All right, nerd, but the next time I catch you, you won't get so lucky." Deku would immediately run out of there, and after lunch was over, Bakugou would have one goal on his mind: finding that quirkless dickhead Parker. As Deku would basically be running around through the corners, he would basically end up bumping into Bakugou on his way to class, seeing as Bakugou knew exactly where Deku was going. He would end up walking over to him and say, "Hey, you think it's funny to do that to me, kid?" As Deku would turn around and say, "No, Bakugou, I swear it wasn't me." As this is when Bakugou would throw an explosion at Deku's face, as Deku would see it coming at him in slow motion with the spider senses, which would kick in. Deku would dodge out of the way in a sort of Spider-Man fashion in the movies if you guys watched it. After that, Bakugou would see his hand was a little hurt after that, and he'd say, "You're gonna pay for that, Deku." As he would proceed to throw another hit at Deku, and Deku would dodge it too. This is when Bakugou would look at Deku in a strange way, and he'd say, "What's going on? Why do you keep dodging?" Deku would say, and this is when Bakugou would go in to tackle Deku, but before he can, Deku would do a front flip over him as Bakugou would say, "Huh?" And this is when Bakugou would throw an explosion at Deku, as Deku would say, "No, I can defend myself." He would throw a punch at Bakugou, which would actually send him crashing into the locker room and leaving a print of himself indenting himself into the walls of the lockers. After this, Bakugou would get up, and the teacher would walk up to Deku as he would say, "Izuku, how dare you hurt another student?" Deku would then be called into the main office, and well, this is when Deku would get scolded by the principal and the teacher who actually saw everything go down. He would say that Bakugou started it too, but seeing as Bakugou lost, he would end up getting about 3 days of suspension, with Deku getting, Bakugou would get 1 day of suspension, and Deku would get 3. Seeing as he gets 3, he would be gone Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. After this, Deku would have actually been smiling this whole time. Deku would be thinking, this is my quirk. It has to be. It just has to be. I woke up strong. I shot webs. I'm stronger. Everything was in slow motion. And this is when Inko would come over to pick up Deku, as she would say, "Izuku, how could you have gotten in a fight?" She would begin to start scolding Deku, and she would notice that Deku was smiling the whole time. She would ask him why he's so happy, and Deku would look at her. She would say, "Mom, I got my quirk." Inko would look at Deku as she would say, "No way." As Deku would say, "I swear, Mom, you remember the muscles you saw me with in the morning? That wasn't me. I haven't even been working out. That must have been my quirk." Inko would immediately say, "Let's go to the quirk doctor." As Deku would immediately light up, and they would of course go to the quirk doctor. To which this is when the doctor would say that, he doesn't know what's going on, but this has to be a quirk. He has to be some sort of late bloomer. The strength, it's definitely there. Deku was able to pick up like 50 times his own body weight, and it was just completely insane. This is when the doctor would begin to ask Deku if there's been any weird occurrences lately, and Deku would think of the spider. He would then say no, and this is when Deku would just go home with his mom, Inko, extremely happy. This is when we're now going to have Deku arriving home, as Inko would immediately rush to Hisashi, and she would say, "Dear, he finally unlocked his quirk." Hisashi would look at Deku as he would say, "Is that true?" And Deku would say, "Yeah, I have spider powers from what the doctor told me." This is when Hisashi would say, "I knew it. I knew someday you were going to be unlocking your quirk. How about we go over there and help you get trained up?" As this is when we're going to be having a little bit of a training montage when Deku and Hisashi both training in a little bit of an abandoned warehouse, kind of similar to the one that Andrew Garfield worked out in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. This is when Deku would find out a couple of his abilities. And why do I say a couple? Well, it's because all of his abilities haven't been unveiled just yet. Deku would discover that so far, He has incredible speed. Deku can create electricity from his fingers. He can turn invisible. He can adapt in fights. And it seems that he has a weird sort of second consciousness within him. See, in this version, the symbiote known as Venom was actually taken apart and taken into consideration when they were creating the spider. They took some of the symbiote's DNA, and so Deku has some of his innate abilities. Deku has the ability to see about 2 seconds into the future. He has some sort of weird future sight. He has super senses. He has incredible intelligence. It was amplified by the spider. He's faster than Spiderman. If I had to give you guys a sort of comparison, he'd be about 5 times faster than him and comparable to All Might's strength. Deku has also different types of webbings. He has invisible webbing, black webbing, acid webbing, lightning webbing, fire webbing, and metal webbing. It's strange. Deku doesn't not only have normal webbing, but he literally has different variations of it, which he can actually shoot out of his normal body. It shoots out like fluids, meaning that it doesn't come from some sort of device. Deku has it all naturally. And as I already said, Deku has some pretty incredible webbing. Now, if you're wondering, yo, dude, why does he have all this? Why are you making Deku Spider-Man so OP? It's a commission. Like, bro, my man Keith asked me for these powers, and I was game. These powers are incredible. Anyways. The metal webbing, it's very strong. The fire webbing, it basically is just normal webbing that can light on fire. Due to Miles Morales being able to have lightning webbing, I see no problem with fire, acid, or black webbing, which pretty much kind of comes from Venom's ability, which is kind of what Deku has a little bit of an ability to do. His suit. He's going to unlock his suit a little later, but his suit is going to come from the symbiote. You guys will see on the second part. Not yet. You guys aren't ready for all that heat just yet. Anyways, that being said, Deku would end up finding out a couple of his powers so far, and this is when the couple of days would go by, as Deku would have ended up working on trying to control them, but so far he's only able to use them whenever in very weird situations. This is when Deku would decide to jump off of a building, and he would finally discover how to use his Spider-Man powers. He'd start swinging from building to building with his mother and father, of course, not knowing, because if Deku didn't die from this, they would kill him themselves. Anyways, this is when Deku would return to school the very next day, the last day, and this is when Bakugou would approach Deku in the middle of classes. He would say, "You got some nerve to come back here, even after what you did, Deku." As Deku would say he's sorry, and I mean, he didn't really mean to do that, but Bakugou did come after him. As Bakugou would slam his hand on Deku's desk and say, "Yeah, I came after you shot me with some weird webs. Now, you need to stay out of my way, Deku." As Deku would say, "Sure thing, Bakugou," he would sit in the back of the class and Bakugou would walk off. As this is when the whole entire day would basically end, and Bakugou at the end of school, when Deku's walking home, would end up approaching Deku with both of his little goons behind him. Bakugou at this point would try to jump Izuku, and this is when both of Bakugou's little goons would rush at Deku trying to attack him, but Deku would just be like, nah, and he would literally shoot webs at both of them, as he would literally cause them both to rush into each other and slam each other's heads into each other. They would both get knocked out, and at this moment, Deku would have a little bit of a cocky grin on his face as he would say, "What's the problem, Bakugou? Can't keep up?" As Bakugou would say, "Those two were just weaklings. You'll see, I've trained." As he would blitz towards Deku, well, not really blitz, since it's my hero, nobody can really blitz, but he would rush towards Deku as he would proceed to almost catch Deku off guard. Psych, no he would not. Deku would literally see what Bakugou was about to do with his foresight, and he would move out of the way. As well as using his spider senses, he would grab Bakugou's leg and with his strength smash him into the ground in a sort of Hulk fashion to Loki in the movie, in case you guys have seen the Avengers. This is when Deku, after doing that, would literally stand over the 3 goons that he just defeated and just run away, as he did not want to get in trouble after that. It's the final day of school, and he is not having no summer detention, leading to Bakugou getting extremely angry seeing Deku run away. He would say, "How did that kid get a damn Quirk?" As he would then pass out due to his body just kind of failing him. He did get literally ragdolled by Deku. This is when we were finally going to have Deku going home. And this is when Bakugou, after a couple of years of kind of just getting, folded like a lawn chair by Deku, would finally leave Deku alone. Years would pass by, and we're now going to have a little bit of a time skip to when Deku is 15 years old. His final day of middle school. Now, during that time, you guys are probably wondering, what happened with Bakugou and Deku? Now, of course, Bakugou is the type of person to train and think that he's stronger now. So, Bakugou would, of course, train, and he would occasionally challenge Izuku every time he would feel strong enough. But, of course, Deku would, of course, just completely, as I said, fold the man like a lawn chair. He's way too OP, even without any of his experience. And now, Deku has a perfect control over all of his abilities. At this point, Deku is just too broken. Deku has mastered his ability of using metal webbing, which he uses to create sort of boxes around people, sort of prisons, I guess you could say. His fire webbing, he uses it on, kind of just slight moments. He doesn't really need to use the fire webbing, seeing as he can kind of just do that to light a blaze or something like that. And he would also use his lightning webbing. That one's the one he uses the most. He can control it to over 100 million volts, and he would also have the abilities of acid webbing. He can shoot short spurts of acid, sort of like Mina, and he even has black webbing, which is sort of like Venom's, which is kind of self-explanatory. He would also have invisible webbing, which is invisible to the naked eye. He's 15 times stronger than the original Spider-Man, 15 times faster, smarter than, like the original Spider-Man by 2 to 3 times. Perfect spider senses, meaning that this version doesn't have a sort of dysfunction. I don't know if you guys seen Far From Home, the second one, where they told him he had erectile dysfunction, but he doesn't have that. And Deku has the ability to see 20 to 30 seconds into the future with a Spider-Man's healing factor, and of course he has the personality of Peter, just because, we want to make him cocky. We want to make him confident, not cocky. Deku definitely knows the difference between the two of them off of seeing Bakugou. He knows what it's like to, be the kid on the other side. He would never wish that on somebody else. So he never uses his power or flashes it off in the way that Bakugou does. Matter of fact, he never even tries to use his abilities at all. He just trains with them just in case he ever does need them. And trust me, he will, because if you think that this version of Deku was OP, trust me, he's gonna need it due to a villain that I'm going to include. So, yeah, in case you're thinking, yo, Zether, this Deku is too OP. I don't care. If you don't like it, leave, bro. Leave. So, yeah, to those of you who do like it, apologies you had to hear that. Anyways, to continue. Now, Deku, of course, has invisibility, as I already said, and all the other abilities that I basically previously mentioned. Of course, I know I kind of, wasted a little bit of time, but as I said, now we're going to be flashing over to the last day of middle school with Deku in the back talking to his girlfriend. And yes, Deku has a girlfriend. Her name is Mary Jane. Bet a lot of you guys didn't see that coming. She is the other character which I am including into the series, and she has a shape-shifting quirk, which is super smart, kind of like the Far From Home version of Mary Jane. Now, that being said, this version of Deku, you may be wondering, how did he even get a girlfriend, Zether? Well, this version of Deku is a lot more liked. He even has more confidence to back it up, and he knows the difference between being cocky and confident, just due to Bakugou, as I had already stated. Bakugou showed him an example of what not to be, and Deku always tries to be the best version of himself. Now, you guys are probably wondering, dude, when did Mary Jane get introduced to the story? It was about 2 years ago. Now, she would have ended up being a sort of transfer student, and she would have ended up moving to Japan after a couple of years. Deku would have, of course, ended up teaching her a couple of things, and they ended up hitting it off very quickly, with Inko and Mary having a pretty cool relationship, to say the least. This is when Deku would, of course, kind of be talking with her in the back, as the teacher would walk inside and do his usual, I know you all want to become heroes. I'm just going to skip all over that. And Bakugou, yeah, he still is extremely cocky. Even though he shouldn't be like that, he still thinks he's the best for some reason. He hasn't fought Deku for 2 years, so he hasn't had a little bit of a reality check yet. So Deku would be in the back kind of talking to Mary, and they're both not really paying attention. People would be saying that Deku's definitely going to make it into UA after the teacher would announce that Deku wants to go there. He would even say that Mary wants to go there. And this is when Bakugou would stand up, as he would say, hey, you better not come into UA, either of you. I'm gonna be the only one who gets in from this cruddy school, and you two will be stuck in my dust. As Deku would say, yeah, Bakugou, whatever. With the class ending and Bakugou going off with his goons, just doing whatever it is they did in the original. This is when Deku and Mary would say that, they kind of want to go to Deku's house and have some dinner over there. As Deku would say, sure thing, as they would take a tunnel over there. A little bit of a different path, but they wouldn't be worried. And this is when the sludge villain would jump out at Deku, as, of course, Deku could see it coming. Deku, as soon as the sludge villain would come in, he would shoot a web towards Mary and have her be kind of propelled into the sky. As she would be held up by a webbing, the sludge villain would say, "Give me your body, kid. I didn't know that freak was in town." As Deku would say, "What? You want my body? No way, you freak!" As the sludge villain would say, "Enough of this. I don't have the time to mess with you. Now give me your body." As he would rush towards Deku, Deku would say, all right, you want it? Take it," as he would stand still and the sludge villain would engulf Deku. This is when Mary Jane would say, "No, Deku, what are you?" As this is when immediately Deku would have lightning just charge off of his body, as the sludge villain would get electrocuted with 1,000,000 volts. The sludge villain would immediately just be like, "Ah!" as it would get off of Deku, and this is when All Might would arrive, as he would say, "I am here." To which All Might would basically meet Deku, and he would get an autograph along with Mary, and All Might would ask Deku what his quirk is. He would say it's sort of a spider quirk, and All Might would understand as he would jump off, and due to Deku not having actually having a quirk in this version, means that Deku won't even have to ask All Might, "Can I become a hero?" because he already knows he can. Deku is way too strong to not become a hero. Like, come on now. Anyways, this is when, they'd basically go over to Deku's house, and this is when, Mary would walk into the door. Mary Jane would walk in there. She would basically say, "Hey, Miss Parker," as Inka would look towards, her, and she'd basically say, "Oh my god, hey, you never told me she was coming over, Deku." Deku would say that, a little bit of a surprise, and he'd put his stuff down as they would have a normal dinner, and this is when we're now going to cover the 10-month training arc, which they both are, of course, going to train together. Deku would train her in hand-to-hand combat as well as himself, due to the fact that, of course, Mans has to learn that too. He spent the last couple of years just training on his abilities instead of focusing on how to actually fight. So Deku would use these 10 months to fight in hand-to-hand combat, and she would use this time to practice on her shape-shifting abilities. She's pretty OP at this point, and she can actually transform into not only other people but objects as well. She can even transform part of her body, kind of in atomic-y fashion. So yeah, that's basically how they both end up with the 10 months of training. I don't really have too much to cover in terms of that. I mean, there's no All Might or One for All, and they don't actually end up clearing the beach. Mirio ends up doing that with All Might, just due to the fact that he ends up getting it. And this is when we're both just kind of going to have them all go to the entrance exam. On this day, Deku and Mary would be dropped off by Inko, as she would say, "Good luck, you two," and Deku and her would look back as she would say, "Thanks," as they would end up walking inside, and of course Deku and her wouldn't trip, so there's no meeting Uraraka yet. So this one they would go inside and take the written portion, to which Deku would completely ace, getting a perfect score, and she would get something similar. She'd get about 90-something% on the test. This is when they would go outside and take the practical portion of the exam, to which Deku would look at her and say, "You ready?" And she would say, "About as ready as I'll ever be," as this is when President Mike would say, "Go, go, go!" There's no countdowns in a real battle. Deku would grab her by the waist and literally swing himself over the gate, as he would throw her and she would go crashing into one of the villains. She would have ended up turning into a giant wrecking ball, and Deku and her would end up kind of tag teaming a bunch of villains. Deku and her would end up racking up about a solid 100 points respectively each, and Deku is just kind of having fun, just being pretty cocky, I guess you could say, kind of talking a little bit of smack to the villain, to the robots, even though they can't even hear him, just due to the fact that, as I said, Deku kind of has a little bit of a Peter personality. And yeah, Deku would end up kind of going through with this, just kind of beating on these robots left and right. Not a single one of them would stand a single chance. That is, until the 0-pointer would actually show up. As soon as Deku would hear the ground rumble, he would notice that there's a girl stuck under some rubble, and he would look towards Mary Jane as he would say, "You got it?" As she would say, "Of course I do." She would immediately start running over to Uraraka. She would begin to take the rubble off of her and save her. And as that's happening, Deku would literally just be swinging from building to building, getting to the 0-pointer's level. As Deku would say, "It's time to put you down." Deku would swing himself all the way up there, and in a sort of similar fashion to like a little Superman punch, Deku would come in and say, "Smash!" Throwing a punch reminiscent to the one that he threw in the anime. He would send the what's called a 0-pointer crashing, and he would literally change the weather just like All Might does. After that, Deku would swing down onto the ground with his spider webs, and Deku would land perfectly safe. As this is when she would say that was a little sluggish for him, and Deku would say, "Come on, I did my best." Deku would immediately just be looked at by Uraraka, and she would just be like, "You just," as Deku would say, "What?" She would say, "You're incredible." As Deku would say, don't mention it. I saw you needed helping. And, it's the right thing to do after all. And I mean, we are going to become heroes. As he would basically ask her if she's fine. They would take her to Recovery Girl. And they would say their goodbyes. As Deku and her would basically go off to their own things. They would end up going off to do their own little, separate things. And going off to Deku's house. As this is when she would ask Deku, what they're going to be doing tomorrow. As Deku would look at her and say, well, you're going to be getting part 2 of What If Deku Was Spider-Man tomorrow if you guys smash 500 likes. So yeah, boys, you guys are going to be needing to smash a like goal of 500 likes if you guys want the next part. With that being said, though, guys, I appreciate you guys for watching the entire video. Keith, bro, I appreciate you for sponsoring the video, aka, kind of doing the commission what if. And yeah, in case any of you guys want to know what a commission what if is, just kind of go on my channel and there's like a little thing, a video called commission what if. If you guys want me to make a what if for you, you just have to pay a little bit of a fee and I'll do it for you, a whole series. Or it can be a what if movie. Whichever one, either or. That being said, though, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to go down below and smash that like button. Do your boy a favor, as well as, hit the subscribe button in case you aren't already subscribed. And check out the Discord server, which will have links down in the description, as well as the link for my boy Dankage. He's actually the one who made this thumbnail. And if I do say so myself, this thumbnail is amazing. But with that being said, though, guys, you guys all know the drill. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.